One in a million to one villain. Too hot to be in the kitchen, I'll end up melting the ceiling. What's going on,
Hello.
Hobby Lobby? It's your boy Javier Javier with the Javier Javier Show. Make sure you say it twice. I am here with a special guest, Lit. You know, that's what they call her on the streets. So uh I wanted to bring her on. We're gonna talk about homelessness and we're gonna get really in depth about the homeless crisis and she's gonna give us her experience, but also let me introduce Lit and let her tell you all about herself.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And thank you so much, Javier, for giving me a platform. I rarely get to speak about the homeless crisis from my perspective because I am, I guess, what you call a conservative and have different views from most people who are experiencing it or who are looking to find solutions to it. I actually lost my housing in 2013. I've been homeless for most of the decade. I had been a teacher in the school system in Detroit, Michigan, and we had a sudden layoff. It was like 4,000 of us at one time. You know, we had to reapply for our jobs. Most of us weren't rehired. And it just came so suddenly that a lot of us couldn't, um,
Mm.
regroup in time enough to fall into um, serious financial circumstances. And I know of a few others actually ended up losing my housing. And so I ended up sleeping in my car, um, locked my keys out of my car, had to sleep on the streets literally
Mm.
for a few nights. Very blessed that I didn't have to spend more time on literally outside, as is very often the case. But I went to our local shelter, which is, pretty much run by a liberal establishment. It's a liberal city. And just through that experience, found out that the solutions that exist for ending homelessness aren't really the solutions that are going to end it.
Mm.
And since then, I've been speaking out about that. And I was blessed to get through the homeless crisis, or I'm getting through. I still reside in a hotel, um, but I'm doing much better. I'm not sleeping in my car. I just got a new car, as a matter of fact, this year.
Nice.
And things are looking up for me. Things are looking up for me. And it wasn't through the liberal establishment.
Mm.
That was not how I got here. So,
That's very interesting. I know there's a lot of details that we could really, flesh out and kind of get a better understanding. Um, I know you didn't expect to wake up one day homeless, and I'm pretty sure that was kind of like a shock to you. Um, so to not jump in on the political side of things too fast, when you first found yourself in this situation, what was your first initial reaction? Like, did you have a plan going forward, or did you try to implement a plan that just you found that it was difficult to actually, find the resources that you needed to fix your situation?
well, I think like most people, I was in denial. I really didn't think it could happen to me. It was no way that I could end up homeless. I had gone through some financial hardships. I've been a teacher most of my adult life. And the school district where I previously worked, um, I had left that district about 10 years prior. And the circumstances weren't great. The school systems aren't really, um, you know, that healthy for your self-esteem, for
Mm.
your psychological health. So the first time it was really more or less just being fed up. And I moved in with parents with my teen son. And I didn't even realize that was homelessness. But through that time period, I developed like a landscaping business. I'd never gone into a factory. I worked in a factory. I'd gone right from high school to college and from college to teaching. So I
Mm,
kind of, was able to experiment with a lot of things and writing and just learned how to be independent, especially having the ability to work in a factory, having been from my professional background. I thought there was no way, no way
mhm.
that I'd ever be without income. I'm like,
Yeah.
so they lay us off, fine, I can do that. I can go to the factory, I can do landscaping. Um, but as it turned out, I had savings. I had to go into my savings. And it's difficult when you have to pull out of your savings like on an emergency basis because there are all these penalties. It's not quite as rapid as you would need.
Hmm.
There's all sorts of delays. Um, and I was around my apartment. I started seeing things that weren't repaired, the things that needed repair. There was dripping. It was a nice apartment, but the ceiling was dripping. And I reported it, and I kind of got in dispute with the landlord. So they were sort of eager to get rid of me.
Mm,
I've been there for 10 years. Um, and when worse came to worse, I went to court fully thinking I had, you know, um, a defense. And the judge said, and I even had video. I thought he was going to let me present my case. And he flat out said, no, I don't want to hear it.
mm,
Bye, you're evicted. And I mean, I just left there in such shock. And by the time I got back to my apartment, I mean, it was real. They were packing my bags and just large, garbage bags. And
mm,
um, I just went through the whole thing, just
yeah.
trying to hope I could cope. And yeah,
So you said you mentioned you had a son. You said that you had a son. How old is your son at the
my
time?
son's an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he was about 10 years ago, so he was, um, middle age in his 30s or so. And he initially helped me. He and his then girlfriend initially helped me, but things went sour there. And that's really a big part of homelessness is that people have no family support.
Yeah.
Family is a critical component to surviving homelessness. And generally, you see people out, they've probably lost contact with that family support. And that happened to me. So
Mm,
very difficult to go
yeah.
through because I raised my son as a single parent. And I, you know, um, just thought that there was a bond there that couldn't be, broken. But,
Mm. Yeah.
he's married.
I'll be honest. I never, when I started this show, I never thought that I would be having a conversation about homelessness. It's amazing how a lot of these things are tied together in the atmosphere and the culture that we live in, and not having that family structure of support when people are going through the toughest times. And you mentioned that the homelessness was basically in a liberal city where you were homeless at, and how much did the politics of the time play into your experience while being homeless?
Well, when I became homeless, it was just prior to um, a tent city being torn down. That happens all around the world, actually, but definitely around the country, where the government comes in and tears down these established communities where people go and can at least find a refuge in the absence of mainstream housing. And
Mm-hmm.
we had a tent city, and there was a group. They were organized, and the city had just shut that down. So I missed the tent city, but I kind of got an idea of the disposition of the city towards people who are experiencing homelessness. Um, and that has pretty much carried throughout. The city is liberal in terms of allowing people to uh, well, panhandling is actually a constitutional right. But people, panhandlers, aren't generally harassed. They're called buskers. You know what a busker is?
No.
Okay, buskers are those people who like will perform on street corners, like
Oh,
the
okay.
guitar and they sing or whatever. That's a busker. So
Mm,
they're pretty liberal about allowing buskers to perform on the streets. Um, but when it comes down to actual policies that would prevent and alleviate people from experiencing homelessness, that's where they're weak, and they're like most liberal cities in that regard.
yeah,
And
because I would
I went
imagine
to the
that.
local shelter.
Oh, yeah. Because I would imagine that, you know, the taxes in the local areas, the amount of tenants and people who can build, and all of the red tape they have to go through to actually set up places for people to get low income housing. A lot of that can play into politics of the time, which could have, limited the opportunities that may have been around you at the time, or the access to resources to help you get back where you needed to be. Um, so you went to a homeless shelter, and
Yeah, ours is actually called a center,
okay.
and it was established probably about maybe 10 years before me actually becoming homeless. And there was a man who just went to great lengths to have this center built. And ironically, I had taken my son there. My son had at one point moved to New York and had to move back and couldn't stay with me because of the way my apartment was set up. So he had actually gone to New York and experienced homelessness, but he knew what he was doing. He planned it. You know, he said, I'll go out there, I'll finish my high school diploma. He was just out of high school. And he went there and accomplished all that, got his diploma. Um, and he's also into cooking, so he was able to sell food in Central Park, and he
Mm,
became like a bike messenger. So I mean, he was younger and that sort of thing, and then he moved back um, and couldn't stay with me. So I said, well, let's try that the local, well, a city over shelter, and he could go to school there as well because it's community college, and that's what he did. He went there for about maybe stayed in the shelter for maybe 2 months, or the center. Um, the Delana Center is what it's called, named after Robert J. Delana, a banker who had worked hard to bring it into existence. Um, but he went to community college, you know, right after that, got a place and, never looked back.
mm,
Met his now wife, and, that's the way things went. So I went to the center, and I just had a different experience. It wasn't
mm,
the same. As a matter of fact, they have, and this is pretty much around the country, they have what they call warming centers. And my homeless experience started in February. So I went there, was in my car, was driving around, had nowhere to go, had no idea where I was going. And I went to the center, and they said, well, if you come back at 9 o'clock tonight, you're guaranteed a spot. And that was
mm.
like the best news because it was cold. I didn't know I didn't have survival skills. I didn't know about sleeping in my car at that point. I'm just out of teaching, and I'm like, where am I
Yeah.
going to sleep tonight? So
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Mm,
So I went, and they actually, there's a line, and everybody had to test for alcohol, you know, um, and once you pass that, they give you, and put your, I think, social security number down. They give you a blanket, you go get on a mat, and it's a good place to be when it's cold outside. And the people were very welcoming. There was women on one side, couples, men. It was great um, for about the first week. For
mm.
about the first week.
Uh-oh.
Now, mind you, I came through the '70s, okay, and I have always considered myself somewhat of a feminist. Um, I don't necessarily join any feminist group, but I do speak up where I think women are being, you know, um, not
Misuse.
treated fairly.
Yeah.
And I noticed at the the Delana Center where I was that um, they would repurpose the cafeteria for the sleeping area, the warming center, and it would be the guys who would move out the chairs, the guys who would mop the floors. And I said, "Where are the ladies? You know, come on." So they directed me to a guy who was sort of running things. He was also, of course, experiencing homelessness. And he said, "Well, if you come back tomorrow night, we'll have a job for you." And I did that. And then all the ladies looked in and got mad at me because
Mm.
they said, "Well, why haven't we gotten the job?" And there were actual perks to that job because you got to get in early and didn't have to stand outside in the cold waiting to get in.
Mm.
So I had no idea about that. But I that was one of my first little disputes. And then things started coming up. I have major depression. They misplaced my medication and just things kind of went from bad to worse. And um, they did give me a room, and I went down to watch television, and I asked the question about if anyone was watching the channel. It was, I'm a Christian, just so that you know.
Mm.
I was watching, what was the show? Joe Olstein, who's
Mm.
a minister. I'm like, I got to get my Palm Sunday, service. And someone said it was like a little dispute. It was really a contentious environment anyway. And I didn't know this. So I got an argument. I called one of the ladies there that was over the program. I called her a bitch. I was like, bitch. That's how it came out. And I had no idea that was coming out. That's what happened. So she said,
Yeah.
"You get off of this floor." So I had to go back downstairs. See, I was in a treat because I was out of the warming center. I was like in privileged area, but it was just a
Mm.
politics literally there. I mean, and the way there was a lot of contention. So um, I left, and then one thing led to another. And one day I just said I can't take it, and I left in my car, and I'm near
Mm.
Detroit, so I was going to Canada. I literally said,
Mm.
might as well start over, might as well start over. That's how my mind was thinking. Not
Yeah.
that it was logical, but that's what I did. And I drove as far as I could, got tired, drove back, headed back, and I saw a rest area. And I pulled into there. And that's where I stayed over the next 2 years in
Wow.
that rest area. And yeah,
Oh wow.
so
That's wow. Like when you told me you had experience with homelessness, I didn't know to what extent. And so I guess now with your lived experience, you're now deciding to take what you've been through in your experience and try to actually be a part of the solution. Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely.
so explain to me kind of like what you are involved in now and how you're doing your part to help.
Well, I'm gonna admit, at first when it didn't happen overnight. I was part of, I guess, what some people call a victim of learned helplessness. I was still dependent on the dinner meals, because I didn't have a lot of food. I would drive from meal to meal to meal, churches, and I wasn't allowed in the center. Well, they kicked me out, and I didn't go through all that. But I wasn't allowed in the shelter anymore, just to make it simple for viewers. And I had to drive around from place to place in my car and just to go to meals. And I felt very dependent on those places. And they would hand out clothes, and the clothing would be ill-fitting. And eventually, I had an opportunity to sell street paper. Are you familiar with that at all, Javier?
Like
And can I
newspapers?
say Javier? Do I need to say it twice in conversation? I don't know.
No, you're fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
It's okay.
um, like like selling newspapers like on the corner of streets and
Yeah,
stuff like that. I've done
here's
that
the.
before. I've done that
Have
myself.
you the
Yeah,
street paper?
I've done those. I used to live off selling my blood and selling newspapers. So,
So you know what I'm talking about.
I understand what you're talking about.
You
Yeah.
understand that poor, that thing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So was it a street paper though?
I sold like local newspapers from like
Okay, now this is called the homeless paper.
okay, I'm not familiar with that
Okay, this is
specifically.
literally called the homeless paper. I tried to sell blood too, but I have COPD and I couldn't. That was like really a letdown because you get that little money every,
Yeah.
But this is called the homeless paper, and
Mm,
they're in a few cities, mostly liberal cities. And what it does, it's an organization where they will give you 10 free papers. You go out and sell those, and the money you make, you go out and start buying your papers, and then you that's kickstart your business, and that's what I did.
oh.
But I also wrote for it, and I would sell the paper for $1. It was $1, and I would sell it. Um, and back during that time, my car was still running. Um, I was still pretty much, disabled, but that gave me a little gas money to put in my
Hmm.
car. I got off of the government phone, the Obama phone. I was able to
Yeah.
buy my own phone, that sort of thing. But my car went out. My couch surfing ended, and I was going to end up on the street one night. And there was one person who sold. We had $1 paper and we had a $10 paper, and he sold the $10 paper, but he was a salesman. He had done
Mm.
that right after high school. He had gone door to door, so he knew all about sales, product knowledge, rebuttals, all of that. So I knew I didn't have any place to sleep that night. So I said, "You've got to teach me how to sell the $10 paper." And I just shadowed him and I learned how to sell that $10 paper. And that is what really made the difference between me staying on the streets and not staying on the
Mm.
streets. I sold it for most of this decade. I've written for it. A lot of my articles are, one of my articles got nominated for best vendor contribution because we're vendors and we're all
Yeah.
over the world. So our conferences are in Greece and, Germany. And this year it was in Greece, and I got nominated for best vendor contribution. So I've sold the
Hey.
$10 paper and went from making, $16 a day to making like $100 a day. And
Mm.
that's what got me out. And then I gradually changed that mindset. I said, I'm not homeless, I'm a business person. I don't care what it is that you sell, as long as you can make it your business. And that's what I did. And I incorporated myself. I'm Lit Unlimited LLC and doing business as a street vendor. And I got my card reader, everything, and just established myself as a business. And I moved from
Mm.
hotel to hotel to finally I got to one. You can see I've got a kitchen and all that. And
Nice.
next is a condo. But it's homelessness is brutal. Even to where I am is great. You know.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
are you
I
are, are you planning on going back to teaching, or are you kind of done with the whole teaching thing and you're gonna pursue
I
this path?
really would not want to, because there's so much freedom here. My main thing now is to help youth on the street. There's so many struggling youth, so many homeless youth that I would have never seen in the classroom. So that's my whole thing. And I haven't gotten a lot of support from this liberal community. That's what upsets me. That really bothers me. Um, because from
Well,
what I see, the
mm,
liberals have an idea of, how people get help. We've got a little place over here for you. You're poor. We'll let you go to a certain place and we'll help you stay there. But as far as um, providing like the technology and spaces for people to actually young people to grow and have experiences, I don't see that happening through the liberal mindset.
hmm.
So yeah, I
Well, I
do
want.
want to. That's what I'm bringing back. But I wanted to give you that background because it was me becoming an entrepreneur that helped me to reach this point.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you, and you kind of just gave it to me. I was gonna ask you like,
Okay.
what was the process that got you back on your feet and getting in the right direction, and that I'm really happy to hear that. And it seems that now you got the right mentality. You know what it is that you want to
Hmm.
do, and I think it's inspiring. I know my mother will love to watch this, and as soon as I get it uploaded, I'm gonna,
Mm.
send it over to her. Cause yeah. So
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
So I want to get into how you got into politics and how you became a conservative, specifically a Trump voter, Trump supporter.
Hmm.
And I want to do that in the next half for the Patreon
Okay.
only section.
Sure.
So, would you like to tell anybody where they can find you or how they can help or any information you want to give out personally? You know,
Absolutely. I have a YouTube channel, and it's called As the Third World in North America Turns. Um, and I did make it as the third world in North America. Yeah, 8 words. I didn't want to shorten it, you know. Like I said, I'm a baby boomer, and we didn't have the privilege of Mr. B, Mr. C. You know, we had to say some of our teachers were like Russian. We had to say their home names, Felisky, da, 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 you know. So I
yeah,
want people to think that there's a third world. So it's As the Third World in North America Turns is the name of my YouTube
yeah.
channel, also Facebook, and there I also have a website. It's and my name is Lit, so it's
L
litspage.com.
I LITS.
TSPAGE um, .com. It may be under my subdomain, which is Weebly.com, because I built it with Weebly, and I don't know if I've kept up with keeping it,
Yeah.
out of the subdomain. But for sure, litspage.weebly, the website builder.com.
All right, folks. Well, go check out Litz. Let us know in the comments below what you think about it and your thoughts on homelessness. And did you find this discussion helpful and informative? What do you think about her story? Thanks so much, Litz, for coming on. If you want to see the rest of this conversation, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/the Javier Javier show, and you can get all exclusive access. And also, if you can't afford just $3 a month for Patreon, all you gotta do is hit that subscribe button below and support the channel that way. Thank y'all so much for watching. We on to the Patreon section. Peace.
1 in a million to one villain. Too hot to be in the kitchen. I'll end up melting the ceiling.